going on, guys? Shawn here again with Weld.com. And if you somehow made it through episode 1, thank you very much. This is part 2 of our roll cage series, so thank you for tuning back in. All right, so let's talk about the materials we're going to use on our GTR roll cages. So we've already decided that potentially the customer at some point might want to run Pikes Peak. We've also checked with our Global Time Attack rule book, and the correct roll cage material we should be using is 1.75 inch 120 wall thickness or 0.120 wall thickness. So we will not be using welded because that's not the correct material. We're going to be using, like I said, drawn over mandrel, and we're also speccing that out because of how much the car weighs. GTRs are pretty heavy vehicles, so we want to make sure that our cage meets our requirements. There's nothing worse than putting a cage in a car only to have to cutting it out because it didn't meet a tech inspection. So when you're looking up cage design information, there's a lot of not great information. I'll be honest, some of the rule books that you're going to look into are very generic diagrams, and it's kind of difficult to interpret that. So what I can suggest is doing a tremendous amount of research before you ever bend anything. There is a right and wrong way to do these things, and unfortunately, it usually is left up to a skilled shop like ours to determine that rule book and then put that into practice. But if this is your first go around, I can't stress enough how important it is to do research, look at other cars that you know have passed tech inspection, maybe ones that are similar to yours or your exact car. But it's real important that you really understand how you're going to build your cage and lay it out. So there's what works for a pre-runner truck, works for a drift car or a road race car or whatever it is. They're not all the same. A lot of the same theories, but we specialize in time attack and Pikes Peak road race cages. But so if this might look a little different from your setup, that's cool. Just make sure you're following your rule book and you're to the T on it. We sketch out all of our roll cages, just making sure we're all on the same page. But that's one of the things that we want to show you guys. How do you even get to the point to sketch that out? Because there are a lot of rules and regulations and a lot of things that that you should live by whenever you're building a roll cage or a chassis or something like that. But we want to explain what all of those are. What's a main hoop? What's an A pillar? What's a B pillar? What's a down bar, dash bar, all that stuff, and there's different ways to make that work for your application. So this is your main hoop. We want to make sure, there's a lot of things like cross bracing. You want to make sure you're over the driver. This is your harness bar. We're going to go over all of those things and where you should probably put them, where you should put gussets, floor boxes, why you need floor boxes and you don't weld just straight to the floor. So we're going to go over all of those things and give you the confidence on how to tackle your setup. All right, so let's jump into the foundation of a roll cage. It's really important to make sure that you're tying in the roll cage to the body of the car correctly. Some people will literally just take a tube and weld it to the floor. If you can imagine a car rolls over, it's gonna punch right through the bottom of the floor. So the things that we're gonna start first on our roll cage is, hold on a second. Don't nut me. Thank you. So we want to get into our floor boxes, and we're going to show you guys how to fabricate these either by hand or by laser and all that stuff like that. But there's a right way and a wrong way to do it, and we're going to go through the whole steps on how to do it correctly. Okay, let's talk about materials and what to use for your roll cage. So there's a lot of different ways to do this here. So you need to find out what type of racing you're going to do. You need to look up your rules and regulations for that type of racing. We do a lot of road race cages, so we kind of pretty much know what we're getting ourselves into. But if you're drag racing, it's not going to be the same cage as a road race cage or drift cage or whatever it is. So the first thing you need to do is look at your rules and regulations. Now in that rule book, it's going to be a lot of factors depending on your class, the weight of the vehicle. In this project, we're working with 2 GTRs, and we're going to give them our full road race, FIA, Pikes Peak spec cages, which are very safety oriented, and there's not a whole lot of wiggle room of what you can and can't do. So it's very specific on material. So because our cars weigh over 3,000 pounds, we're going with 1 3/4 DOM, that's drawn over mandrel tubing, with a 120 wall thickness. So that's going to be built for heavier cars. You can do for cars that typically weigh under 3,000 pounds for the type of work we do. We do 1.5 inches. And then floor boxes. You don't want to weld your tube straight to the floor. That's going to be really thin material, probably 20 to 22 gauge material. And if you weld it straight to it, car flips upside down, it's going to poke right through your flooring. So it's important to do a floor box. So this is a step some shops miss, and this is a crucial step to a proper roll cage. And what we're going to do is, if you can imagine this being the floor, this is the door sill. We're going to weld all the way around this so we have a nice base for our roll cage to sit on top. Now we're going to get into later on why this is a really good way to put floor boxes in, because it lets you weld the top of the cages. We'll get into that later on. We're running 1/8 inch cold roll steel for the floor boxes that we're going to bend up. We're going to show you guys how to do that. Past that, we're doing 1 3/4, 120 wall, 1/8 inch flat plate to tie everything in. So let's get started. All right, so I just ate a giant burrito and I'm super full. So let's get to work. What we do is we start off with a cardboard template for our floor boxes. This is the driver's side front. And you can see it kind of is profile to the the door sill and goes down to the floor. There's a couple reasons why we do floor boxes, but right now I want to get into how we make them. So we've got our cardboard template, and you can do one of two things. Old school Shawn used to just trace this over some sheet metal and cut it out by hand, but we live in 2022 where it makes it really easy to trace this into Illustrator or Fusion or something like that. Hop online and have this laser cut, have it to your door in a few days. We try to schedule our builds to where we have time for this kind of stuff, because if you're just getting started cutting out by hand, that's cool, but if you're trying to meet deadlines and schedules, laser cut parts just a lot faster and more precise. Especially right now, we're doing 2 R35 GTR Skyline roll cages at the same time. So laser cut parts make fitment and all those things a lot easier. On a production scale, we want to fold, weld, and then keep moving on. So we're going to show you how to do all this. So we just bent our floor box up the best we can. We've got a swag off-road finger brake, and it works pretty good, but these tabs are pretty long, so we can only get so far with bending. And so one of the tools I think that's really been beneficial in our shop is this huge vise. I'd recommend you getting one as well. I mean, I got this thing I think in like Craigslist find or something like that for $30, and this is a huge workhorse in our shop, but it's going to let me kind of dial this thing down and bang on it and all that stuff like that. Kind of shows that you can get a little primitive with this stuff sometimes, and as long as you pay attention and do quality work, it still looks like all the pro stuff you see that just robots build. So yeah, we're going to dial this thing in now. All right, we're all bent up, and before we get going welding, we want to clean the surface, because there's going to be some type of oils from tools or whenever they ship it to you or however you pick it up. So it's going to weld a lot better with a nice clean surface. But the other thing I do with all these things before I weld them is I DA sand them, because it's really hard to sand this type of stuff whenever it's in the car. And so if you do a quick sand over it, preps your surface real nice, weld it, and then whenever you have it in the car, you can tape things off and spray it a lot easier because it's already pre-sanded. So she's all sanded, ready to go. I normally use a 180 grit sandpaper. That way we're all prepped up for whatever kind of spray paint or whatever we want to do once the cage is all done. One thing I like to do is I like to knock down these edges a little bit with some some more aggressive grit. All right, so we're all prepped up, sanded, wax grease removed. We're clean as can be, so we're gonna weld these up. I've showed you guys before that one of our workhorse welders in the shop is a Lincoln 140 HD, and it's really good for just general purpose welding. We're not doing like any like massive structural steel welding here. Most of it's general fab, that kind of stuff. So the point of this series is to show you what you can do with budget-friendly tools. So first thing I'm going to do is tack these together. I'm going to actually pin them back so the fitment is really good. We want as little gaps as we can possibly get. That way, our weld's not shooting through the other side and stuff like that. But one of the techniques I use is I make little tiny, just little loop, like curly Q little circles all the way through till I get to the very end, and I round it out. So yeah, we're gonna get these welded up for you and give you some more confidence that this is something you can totally do. So we've got our floor boxes welded up. I think they look pretty good. Not sure we're gonna win any internet awards, but that being said, we've got really nice penetration and all's good. So you can see that, I've got these little circles, and basically how that comes from is whipping the weld in. And it's, you wanna go from one side of the material to the other side. They kind of make nice little, this takes a lot of practice, but going in there and basically it looks pretty, but on the other end you've got really nice penetration on both sides of the material, making them one. That's why I try to do as much bench welding and prep work as I can here. That way I have to actually do as little welding in the car as possible, because I don't know if you've welded it on your back upside down in a roof area or in a dash. It's not fun and it's pretty uncomfortable. So just like love is built on foundation, so is your roll cage. So these are our front pickup points. This is going to be just below your dash, and this is where your roll cage is going to tie in, and then this is going to tie into the floor. These are the rears. This is just behind the seats. This is where your main hoop section is going to tie in. And then for our 6-point, we want to tie in the rear. And this is basically what we've made on the back side of the car to tie in the 2 rear shock towers. These are those brackets. We haven't made those brackets for our second car. We like to laser cut everything, but that being said, some stuff you just need to whip out by hand. So we have a bandsaw that we just kind of work those out. You can see the difference material. This is just raw steel. This actually has a pickling coating over it. You can weld right over top of this, but it's really best practice to kind of remove it as much as you can, especially where you're gonna weld. All right, so I've got my parts all tacked together, and I'm looking for basically a little 45-degree indent there. That way my weld fits really nicely in there, and we're not stacking parts together and getting penetration more on one side than not the other. So getting that nice little valley in there is a really good tip to a super strong part. I've got our little chair brackets. They're not actually for chairs, but they just look like little chairs. But you'll notice that when I'm welding, I'm actually not grounding the part out. So I have a steel table here, which is, I would recommend if you do a decent amount of welding, you can go just down to your surplus steel place. This is, I think, a 3/8 thick top. What would I do is I just ground straight to the top, and that way when I'm welding, as long as my surface area is clean, it grounds itself out. It's a good little trick for you. I'll try that out. This is kind of the start to our strut tower bar setup and tie-in. So again, we're building 2 roll cages identical to each other, but our next step is to make this bar. So we're gonna show you how to do that and weld it in. We need to make some notches in this tube, much like this setup. We can do a bunch of measuring and math and all this kind of stuff, or we can just press the cheat code button and use my buddy Kyle over at KMC's little cheater thing. So basically we want to know flat lines, where all of the flat lines are on this setup, because we actually want to cut this tube directly in half. So you take these little Sharpies, stick this in this little 3D printed deal, stick it on a table like this, run it forward, and just keep it flat along the table. And that's going to leave us nice, clean Sharpie lines. And then, yeah, we'll rock it on the bandsaw and knock it out. All right, so we've got our tube notched, and as you can see, this is a lot stronger setup. Basically putting a notch in the tubing and then welding, as opposed to, you know, just like the tube sitting on top and then trying to weld in that valley. That would be really tricky and messy. So we're gonna have a lot stronger setup by welding down on that bend, and everything's gonna be nice and clean. So we could weld this right here, but the chances of this fitting perfectly is probably slim. So what we're going to do is actually take this, put this in the car, tack it in 3 to 4 points on each side in the car, pull it out, and then weld it on the bench. And then like this one literally like fits perfectly into the car, and we don't have like big gaps to try to weld and stuff like that. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to take the welder over to the car, tack it in, bring it back, and then weld it all up. Welcome to my dojo. This is the not so fun part about welding cages and cars, because a majority of your time is spent in weird, awkward positions. But this is the rear bar that we're working on. It's going to tie in the two strut towers together. So that's we're going to have down bars in the back coming from our main hoop. And this is going to be a really good structural support to make sure the back of the car doesn't, you know, do any movement or anything like that. Essentially welding in a strut tower bar on the car. But we got really good fitment on the car, nothing moves. So we're gonna make a couple tacks. That way when we weld it, it fits right back where we got it. One little pro tip for you, because old young Shawnee boy here really messed up a windshield on my truck a long time ago when I was building a pre-runner. I was building a bed cage and doing a lot of welding near a window, and I destroyed the back window on my truck. So when you're welding, be super careful about sparks hitting glass, because it will ruin the tint, the glass itself, or all kinds of stuff. We're only going to make a couple little quick tacks, but whenever we come in here and do some, you know, serious welding at some point, we're going to tape off and mask off the rear window so we don't damage it. So we've got it tacked in place, and yeah, so it just comes right out. And I typically do, you know, 3 points for a tack. That way, if you do get it to the bench and you tap it on something on accident, 3 points seems to really hold something together where it can't tweak itself too much. We're gonna get a little bit of deflection by welding it, but that being said, those 3 points are really gonna hold it together while we're putting all that heat in it. So we're all tacked up, ready to weld. Really nice fitment on everything, just like the other one. So we're gonna go around and 360 weld everything. Pretty standard stuff. So I just welded this side, which is about a quarter of the welding needed. What I'm gonna do is hop to the other side, weld that same amount, and hop to a different spot. That way we don't put a tremendous amount of heat and end up possibly, you know, warping the part or something like that. Fitment's really key on this, so we want to hop around a little bit, not overcook the part. All right, so we got our bar completely welded up, and our fitment's perfect on it. So this will actually be really good. Instead of welding this to the car now, we'll be able to, in the future, fully weld it. This is a really good platform for the rear of the car and we've got our other base points boxes for the down bars and the main hoop. And so pretty much the next thing is our couple little cleanup little spots and start bending some tube. All right, so we covered quite a bit in the foundation of our roll cage, from raw materials to folding to welding. In future episodes, we're going to do a roll cage design. We're going to show you how to properly design a roll cage. We're going to go into notching, bending, welding, all of that stuff, how to do a correct door bar, how to triangulate all kinds of stuff. So make sure you keep following along in this process. All right, so I want you to like and subscribe to this video. It helps me out, it helps the channel out. But I want to know in the comments below what kind of race car you have, or maybe what kind of car you'd put a roll cage in. And then that way we can get some feedback. I want to see if you guys are road race guys, drift guys, drag car guys, whatever it is. I want to know below. Be sure you follow Weld.com on all social media platforms. Head over to the website, all kinds of informational stuff over there. You can follow me personally at Shawn B26 on Instagram. Be sure to follow our race shop, Attacking the Clock Racing. And until the next episode, see you then.